Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Macedo. We're coming on the air because the Kenosha County District Attorney is about to announce whether any of the Kenosha police officers involved in the shooting of Jacob Blake will face charges. Let's listen.
Complicated conversation, that it be a real conversation, not a simplistic one, and that we talk accurately and thoroughly about the law and the facts of this case. I want to thank Noble Ray, who is the neutral, independent use of force expert in this case, found for this case by the Attorney General of the state of Wisconsin. I want to thank him for the report that he prepared in this case and the conclusions regarding use of force and police training that he has offered us. And also because he is present today and he will have a chance to present those findings to all of you and then to be part of answering questions. I expect us to conclude at 5 today, and again, I expect my presentation and Chief Ray's to be lengthy, so I apologize in advance if there's not a lot of opportunity for question. But I do feel that the occasion and the tragedy that happened on August 23rd is deserving of lengthy discussion by both the prosecutor, myself, and by Noble Ray here today. Again, I want to speak to the tragedy of what happened. This was a tragedy first and foremost for Jacob Blake, who still suffers from grievous injuries. These are life-lasting injuries that he suffers from today. I had an opportunity to tell him what I was going to announce to all of you today in a phone call just a few minutes ago. And his update is that he is still on a daily basis suffering the injuries that he first suffered, of course, on August 23rd. This is a tragedy for those who love Jacob Blake. He is a father, a son, and a nephew. And I want to acknowledge and say that I really feel like the Blake family and Mr. Blake himself have tried to be truly positive forces in the community, asking the community to have peaceful but real dialogue about change that I think is necessary in this community, outlined by the issues exposed in this case. And so I thank them for their positive contributions, and certainly there is a tragedy here for them as well. I have thought several times and had a quick conversation with Mr. Blake today about his children who were in that vehicle. And I have thought, as I considered the evidence many times in these last few months, what the impact to his children that seeing those gunshots would be in their futures. And so I was able to briefly speak to him about that today as well. Clearly, this has been a tragedy for this community. We have seen, based on the results of what happened in the aftermath, that there are persons in this community or outside the community, people who come here, whatever guise that is, that are capable of expressing their anger in these moments by burning things down. The challenge now, and part of what I hope to begin in my conversation today, is rather than burning things down, can moments of tragedy like this be an opportunity to build things? Are there times and circumstances that are tragic where communities in their healing process can begin to make themselves a better community that allows for all points of views and allows for all the parties, even those who feel so disenfranchised, to have a voice? And then I don't want to leave out the officers whose entire careers, in fact their whole lives, have been judged by a few seconds that they conducted themselves on these shifts, and to their families, because there's a tragedy there. They've clearly been impacted in the several months that this decision has been awaited. I want to speak briefly in apology to all the people in the Kenosha community who have suffered in any way from the fact that this date and time of this decision was kept a secret, although possibly the worst kept secret in the history of secrets. But certainly there are many people in this community who felt like their own sense of security or their economic security, their businesses, were impacted by the fact that no one set a particular date, a month in advance, etc., to announce this decision. And that was done deliberately because of security concerns. So the advice we were given is that we could not do that. And so, again, I apologize to persons out there hearing this today who are justifiably angered that they were inconvenienced in those major ways because they were not able to be given advance notice. Today, there's a very narrow decision that must be made. And so I will be announcing today the question of whether the District Attorney's Office, in its professional judgment, feels that there is sufficient admissible evidence to convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that Officer Shesky or any of the other Kenosha officers shot Jacob Blake unlawfully or committed any other offense. That's the task. It's a narrow task today. It's a legal and professional task. But I want to say that I feel in many ways completely inadequate for this moment. I have never in my life had a moment where I had to contend with explicit or implicit bias based on my race. I have never had a moment in my whole life where I had to fear for my safety with either police officers or individuals in authority. And yet I have had conversations with people that I trust and admire who tell me they do have that life experience. So that is an authentic experience I do not have and I do not bring to this decision today. Conversely, I have never been an individual who has left my family and gone to a shift at work knowing I could face armed persons who might try to end my life. And further knowing that in the course of my job, in facing those armed people who might try to end my life, I might not have the option to run away or to hide as any private citizen rationally would. And I know that to be an authentic experience, and that is not an authentic experience I bring to this decision today either. What I do bring to this decision is almost 3 decades as a prosecutor making charging decisions, which is what I'm being asked to do today. I have my entire professional life tried to keep this community safe. Tens of thousands of times I have looked at sets of facts and had to make a decision whether there were sufficient facts that fit the law that would allow the prosecutors, including myself, to be able to prove a case to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt. I have personally taken more than 250 cases to jury trial. So I think I can confidently say where I do have authentic experience and expertise is in an ability to talk to a community and to all of you about what evidence would be admissible in a jury trial if anyone was charged, and whether that evidence would be sufficient to get a conviction. I also have a complete and absolute commitment that that charging decision must be made independent of outside forces or the political winds that swirl about in this year and this era that we're in. It's an absolute commitment I have. And I hope that in these troubled times that our community, and maybe America, has perhaps rarely been in greater need of a neutral, professional person to referee these disputes in the criminal justice system. And so I provide that professional judgment, and I bring that to the evidence today. So, the first thing I want to do is talk about a statute in Wisconsin designed specifically for the investigative and charging process for fatal police shootings. Thankfully, Jacob Blake is alive, right? He is grievously injured, but he is not deceased. But this statute is still an excellent guide to allow us our best chance at an independent investigative and charging decision. So what is the statute? If it's our guidepost, where does it take us? The statute first requires an investigation by an independent agency. And in this case, the Department of Justice, the Division of Criminal Investigations, I'm going to call them DCI, got to the scene as soon as they could. They secured the scene, and they immediately began to be the investigative agency. Ultimately, that responsibility was shared with the FBI in some small amount when they needed additional persons. The statute requires that when that investigation is completed, in as timely, expeditious a manner as possible, it goes to the district attorney in the county where the shooting occurred. And of course, that is, in this case, Kenosha. And in this situation, an exhaustive investigation was done. There's more than 40 hours of squad video. There's hundreds of pages of electronic information. There are almost 200 separate law enforcement reports and almost 1,500 individual pages of police reports. So this was clearly a dramatically exhaustive investigation. And was it expeditious? They got it to Noble Ray, the independent use of force expert on this case, by, I believe, October 8th, 2020, and ultimately to the district attorney's office as well. Then the statute requires that the district attorney, the elected district attorney in that county, must determine if there's a basis to prosecute any of the involved law enforcement. And it is my decision now that I announce today before you that no Kenosha law enforcement officer in this case will be charged with any criminal offense based on the facts and the laws as I will describe them to you now. So it is our decision that no charge will be filed. I'm going to also tell you, just because I think it is important, that no charge will be filed against Jacob Blake in regards to this incident as well. For many of the same reasons, in terms of an overall discussion about this case, that is not something that the district attorney's office intends to pursue. Now, if the district attorney's office does not file charges, if that does not happen, then immediate transparency has to take place. And so what has to happen is, first, the DCI website will, by 5 o'clock today, have available their complete investigative file. And second, the district attorney's office, which is not only going to put this PowerPoint, which is an abbreviated version of our report, will be publicly available, but we have a more lengthy written report that will also be available to the public. Both of those things will be available on a website that will be identified in a final slide here, and they'll both be available at 5 o'clock today. In addition, Noble Ray, the independent use of force expert, has drafted a report with all of his findings. That also will be available at that time. So now I intend to talk about what steps were taken specifically by the DA's office to prepare for this investigation, and then finally what our conclusions are about the law and the evidence in this case. As soon as I saw the video and shared the same emotional reactions that I think so many people in the public did at my first viewing.
We just heard Kenosha, Wisconsin District Attorney Michael Gravely there announcing that no officers involved in the shooting of Jacob Blake will be facing criminal charges. I'm joined now by Alex Perez, our correspondent, who's been covering this story from the beginning, as well as civil rights attorney Ariva Martin, to dig in a bit more on this. Alex, I want to start with you. You've been covering this from the very beginning. You've been with Jacob's family. You've been with critics. What do you think the feedback is? What is the reaction going to be to this decision?
Well, Diane, this is certainly not the news that Jacob Blake's family was hoping for. They were here on the streets of Kenosha just last night, marching peacefully, saying they wanted charges against the officer involved, particularly Officer Rustin Shesky. That's the officer seen in that difficult-to-watch cell phone video shooting Jacob Blake 7 times in the back. This is not the news that they wanted. And they said yesterday that if this were to happen, they would hope that other people would join their cause and fight for charges. Now, you heard the district attorney there explaining in detail and saying he would explain in even more detail why charges were not possible in this case. But essentially, the DA said there that there wasn't enough evidence, he believed, to convince the jury without a reasonable doubt to have a conviction in this case. Now, this community still on high alert since this all happened back on August 23rd. I want you to take a look behind me. You can see perhaps some of of this businesses here boarded up with that plywood. It's the scene basically all up and down here, downtown Kenosha. The businesses are boarded up. You might remember back when this happened, the protests got violent in some cases at some moments. In fact, there was that shooting that happened during the protest where Kyle Rittenhouse, the teenager accused of shooting two demonstrators here and wounding a third, shooting and killing two demonstrators and wounding a third. So this community is bracing for possibly more unrest now that this decision has been formally announced. The DA there saying that he did not warn businesses that this decision was coming, that was part of the strategy. He said it was intentional and deliberate because they want to sort of have as much control of the situation as possible in delivering this news. We also know that the state has activated 500 National Guardsmen to be here to try to maintain the peace should things get out of hand, seeming to believe, knowing that it seems authorities knew there would be no charges filed in this case. Diane, right now I can tell you things are peaceful, but that announcement was just made right now, right at this moment. So we really don't know what to expect as the hours go by. We know Jacob Blake and his family will be responding to this decision to not press any charges against the officer shortly later today. Diane, so we're standing by, we're watching all of this and monitoring it as we move forward. But many in this community, and particularly the family of Jacob Blake, they wanted charges against the officer. They did not get that today, Diane.
And Ariva, we heard the district attorney saying that in a way he feels completely inadequate to make or issue this decision because he himself has never experienced any kind of racial bias or discrimination. But he says he does have a lot of experience as a prosecutor, as someone who decides whether or not a case can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt based on what is actually admissible in court. And based on that, this is the decision that was made. As a legal expert yourself, what do you make of that?
I'm not totally surprised, Diane, by the decision. As he started this press conference, I started jotting down notes, and within 5 minutes, I said there are not going to be any charges filed. I could tell by the tenor, I could tell by the tone, I could tell by the painstaking way that he was going about trying to lay the foundation for what was ultimately going to be the decision of no charges. I think this is a travesty of justice, to be honest with you. I don't understand. I've looked at the evidence, at least that's been made available to the public. Now, obviously, he talked about 1,500 pages, so he has information that has not been made to the public as of yet. But what we saw in that video, that shocking video of that officer holding on to Jacob Blake's shirt, shooting him in the back 7 times in front of his 3 kids, what we've heard from some of the witnesses that were at the scene on that date, suggested that there would be some charges filed against that officer, the Rustin Shesky officer that actually fired the 7 shots. I think this, the African-American community, the Americans across this country that took to the streets over the summer to protest police brutality and also to protest not just the shootings that occurred with respect to African Americans, but then the process that follows, the lack of justice, the lack of prosecutions, the lack of holding officers accountable. I think you're going to see and hear from many community leaders, law enforcement, legal experts, express dismay. And this comes on the heels, Diane, of the decision by the Justice Department not to move forward with any further investigation and definitely no charges in the Tamir Rice case. So I feel like the civil rights community has been dealt 2 very, very serious blows this week.
And Ariva, we're hearing now from the family attorney, Ben Grump, is writing on Twitter saying that obviously they are immensely disappointed and feel this decision failed not only Jacob and his family, but the community that protested and demanded justice. And he goes on to say, this isn't the news we hoped for, but our work is not done and hope is not lost. So what is next for Jacob Blake's family from a legal standpoint?
Well, a couple of things, Diane. Certainly there will be civil lawsuits filed against the city, against the police department for the enormous injuries that Jacob Blake has suffered. Also, there will be lawsuits, I suspect, filed with respect to his children. His children witnessed the horrific shooting of their dad. We can only imagine the kind of trauma that they are experiencing. And what we've been told is that Jacob himself will be permanently paralyzed. So you can think about the kind of medical expenses, the loss of income, the loss of enjoyment of his life that he will experience through, for the next decades or more, given that he's only 29 years old. Also, there is the prospect of federal investigation and potential for federal civil rights charges. We know that there will be a new attorney general that will come into the Department of Justice at the end of this month. That announcement will hopefully come very soon from President-elect Joe Biden. And hopefully with the new attorney general, with a new lead at the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, we may see further investigation and potentially charges filed at the federal level.
And Alex, the most immediate question now in the community seems to be what is going to happen when the sun goes down tonight. What we saw after Blake's shooting was primarily peaceful protests during the day, and then at night, things would turn more unruly with damage and in some cases violence. We know the city and the state has taken some precautions ahead of this decision coming out. What are you expecting tonight? And do you think we'll hear from Blake's family as we have in the past?
Well, Diane, I think we will hear from Blake's family and from their attorney, Benjamin Crump, at some point now that this decision has been formally made public. As you heard, the DA there said, though, they did contact the Blake family ahead of time and spoke to him and them and told them what the decision was going to be. What exactly is going to happen tonight? That's the question everyone here would like answered. You can see all of these businesses boarded up. People are afraid, these business owners are afraid that there's going to be more damage and possibly more loss of life, as we saw back in August during those protests. So they're hoping that things remain peaceful. Jacob Blake's family has called for peaceful protests, for peaceful marches. They say they want to see change develop from this tragedy. They don't want to see more tragedy or violence. So that is the hope here tonight, Diane, that whatever protests or marches there may be, remain peaceful.
Only hoping that as well. Alex Perez, Ariva Martin, thank you both.
Thank you.
And we will have continuing updates right here on ABC News Live throughout the rest of the day. But again, District Attorney Michael Gravely there in Kenosha, Wisconsin, announcing that none of the officers involved in the shooting of Jacob Blake will face criminal charges. Again, we'll have a complete wrap up tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern on ABC News Live Prime with Lindsay Davis. For now, thanks for joining us. I'm Diane Macedo. Have a great rest of the day.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.